Super Rugby round number 4, folks. Teams are out. How are they looking for this 4th round of Super Rugby action, which has been unpredictable, to say the least? We'll go through the squads, kind of ins and outs, some stats. You guys can let us know your thoughts on how this round is going to go. Game number 1 on the Friday sees the winless Crusaders taking on the unbeaten Hurricanes. Who saw that just a month or so ago? Crusaders have had to tinker with their lineup a wee bit. Scott Barrett is sidelined with a fractured finger for the next 6 weeks. So that is a massive loss to that Crusaders pack. But it's the same front row. Quinton Strange and Zach Gallagher will be in the second row. Macca Springer is back on the left wing. And HIGvBRU is going to pull the strings at number 10 for the Crusaders this week. Tom Christie continues to be Super Rugby's top tackler. If he's not the top tackler at the end of the season, I will be very surprised. Sever Reese had a few tries, still continues on the right wing. So yeah, it's kind of a mixture of stability and changes for the Crusaders, but the Barrett one is probably the biggest. A bit of experience on the bench as well, the likes of Owen Franks, Ryan Crotty, Dallas McLeod, all in there as well. For the Hurricanes, who are undefeated, still no Geordie Barrett with that suspension, but a relatively stable lineup. Still Cam Roigard at number 10. He's got more defenders beaten than anybody else in Super Rugby this year. That's not very often that a halfback has that title. Brett Cameron's still at number 10. Kenny Naholo has been playing the house down on the left wing. Very, very stable. They have got one change at loosehead with Numia getting a start this week, and also Devin Flanders is getting a start at number 6. Otherwise, the squad is pretty much the same. Sam Karifi is back on the bench. Sankson is back on the bench. Rakati Stones is back on the bench. But otherwise, a very stable Hurricanes lineup who will be looking to put a bit more misery on this Crusaders lineup, who will be desperate for their first win. Second of the Friday games, all Aussie affair, seeing the Melbourne Rebels taking on the Queensland Reds, who have been a bit of a surprise package this year under Les Kiss. They have had the one loss, but it was that golden point loss to the Hurricanes, so they've been genuinely very good. Taniela Tupou is going to get a start this week for the Rebels. We'll see how he feels after going 40, 50, 60 minutes. A couple of weeks ago, he seemed to not appreciate the start and maybe prefers the bench role, but it's back to starting for him. Otherwise, the squad is relatively stable. The backline has a little bit of a shuffle, with Vaihu up from the bench on the left wing and Andrew Callaway moving to his more familiar fullback spot. A lot of the Rebels play revolves around Callaway, with him having more carries than anybody else in that Rebels squad. Dobbins and Nabo Lakasi are potentially getting their first Super Rugby starts for the Rebels if they come off the bench. And it is a 6-2 split for the Rebels, maybe thinking things are going to get pretty heated up front. As I mentioned, the Reds have been just very, very good thus far this season. Ravai is going to get a start at loosehead prop. Remember, there's no Whakangase for the next few weeks because he's another guy who is going to be serving a suspension. Fraser McCright, though, top tackler for the Reds, one of the top tacklers in Super Rugby, has been playing the house down like an absolute demon. Him and his back row colleagues have just looked phenomenal. There is a change at 10 with Harry McLaughlin-Phillips, who had to come off the bench after Liner went off injured. He's going to pull the strings in a starting role this week with Liner on the bench, so it's kind of a swap for them. But he did well to see out the game last week, so we'll see how he can go with the starting role. And the final of the Friday games, which is kind of a midnight one for those of us here in NZ, sees the winless Force taking on Moana Pacifica. Maybe their best chance to get a win thus far for the Force. They'll be pretty desperate to get it done. They have kept things pretty stable as well. Anthony's going to get a start this week. Finds Lelawasa also starts ahead of Nick White, which is a big call, but he's a Wallaby, so he needs a bit of game time. And then you've still got that man, Harry Potter, on the right wing. He needs to watch those yellow cards from the restarts when contesting high balls, but he's had more run meters than anybody else in Super Rugby, so certainly a bit of a danger man. It's a 6-2 split for the Force as well. For the Moana Pacifica boys, they've still got a pretty lengthy injury list, but they are bolstered by the return of Samoan try-scoring phenomenon hooker Sama Malolo, so he's there in the number 2 jersey. Julian Savia continues on at number 12. Remember, he broke the all-time try-scoring record for Super Rugby last week with that try, and if you haven't seen it on NZR+, they have his kind of origin story. It's a great wee watch. It's only like 15-20 minutes, I think, but gives a bit of insights into his kind of development as a rugby player, and it's just it's a really good watch. So if you haven't checked that out, NZR+, link down in the description. Got the Julian Savia origin story and a bunch of other content. Nigel R. Wong is on the right wing. He missed out last week, but he's back into the squad. Lily Afano is going to pull the strings at number 10. He swaps place with William Harvili. So, yeah, a couple of changes in that regard. But that one's going to be, I think, a pretty hotly contested one with both sides backing up after losses will want to kind of turn things around. The Saturday game starts off in Dunedin in the afternoon with the Highlanders, who snuck past the Waratahs last week, taking on another Aussie opponent in the Brumbies, who haven't really hit full gear just yet. Jack Taylor is going to get a start for the Highlanders in this one, alongside Cameron Miller and Martin Borgado. Argentinian international who was in the Argentinian World Cup squad. He was kind of one of the late arrivals to that Highlanders camp, so he's on the left wing. Billy Harmon, having served his time on the bench last week, returns to the starting lineup. He captains the side from number 7. He is the joint top tackler for the Highlanders this season. The other guy he top tackles with is Hugh Renton, but unfortunately he's out for 6 weeks with an ankle injury. For the Brumbies, they've made a couple of changes in the front row with Scoop and Pollard getting starts after being on the bench last week. So Lockie Lonergan and James Slipper dropped to the bench. They've likewise brought Jerome Brown in to start. And for try, Corey Toole remains on that left wing. He has been absolutely phenomenal for the Brumbies this season. So real kind of weapon of a player. The penultimate game is from Hamilton. Kind of evening kickoff, 7:30 from FMG Stadium in the Waikato. The Chiefs coming off a kind of unexpected loss over in Australia to face the Fijian and Drua, who beat the Crusaders, so will be absolutely flying high. But with Fiji being a bit of a fortress, and away trip to Hamilton is certainly a bit of a different story, but they'll be backing themselves. Jimmy Tupou gets a start this week for the Chiefs in an all-change second row because Selby Rickett is also up from the bench. Arkoi has an injury and Tupou is on All Blacks load management, so that's a little bit of disruption into that Chiefs type 5. Ruben O'Neill also gets a start after being on the bench last week, and they've shuffled the back line around with Daniel Rona out to the right wing and Sean Stevenson, who's the Chiefs' top guy for run meters, top guy for defenders beaten. He is there back at fullback, and ALB is back in the number 13 jersey as well after being on the bench last week. For the Drua boys, they have also made a few changes. Kurivoli is going to get his first start of the Super Rugby season at number 9. They've also brought in Dolokoto to start at hooker, so there's no Ikanaveri for the Drua this week. I didn't read that he's injured, but he's not in the 23 because Toigi Tama is the replacement hooker for this one. They've got also a couple of replacement props who we didn't see last week in Tukiri and Tawake, so yeah, certainly ringing a few of the changes. Revo Tamanda is still there on the right wing. Speaking of guys who like to clock up defenders beaten and run meters, like him and Sean Stevenson, look for their numbers at the end of the game. They'll both be right up there, one would imagine. And they've got Naito Kandi coming into the side in the number 12 jersey, who also didn't feature last week. But the rest of the forward pack, like the locks and the loose forwards, that's all stable. So a mixture of kind of stability and changes for the Drua. And the final game sees the Waratahs, who will be really gutted that they couldn't get that last penalty last week, taking on the Blues, who had a bit of disruption with some backs going off early. The Waratahs have gone for the 6-2 split this week, which is the one that kind of bit the Blues last week, and they have made a few changes. Nawani Tawase switches to fullback for this one, so Tristan Riley switches to the right wing, and Dylan Peach is back from the eye injury, so he's back on the left. So it's in kind of all new back three in terms of the numbers that are on guys' backs. And they've also made changes at loose head and hooker with Heaven and Thompson Stringer getting starts this week after serving time on the bench. Jake Gordon, though, is maybe the one to watch because he has been an absolute fiery form ball in hand for the Tars this season, and Charlie Gamble is only behind Tom Christie in terms of tackles made this season, so he'll be looking to shut the Blues down. The Blues haven't gone for a 6-2 split this week. It's back to the regular 5-3 with Sam Knock, Harry Plummer and Cole Forbes, the 3 back replacements. There's no AJ Lamb this week because he got concussion. Akira Ioane switches back to 6. Hoskins Tutu, 5 try. Hoskins Tutu back to the number 8 jersey after being on the bench last week. Caleb Clark's back into the 23. Bryce Heems back into the 23 at number 12. And Tuanga Fussy, who was injured last week, back at loose head. Dalton Papali'i captains the side at number 7. But yeah, those are the teams, folks. How do you reckon they are lining up for round number 4? Will it be full of upsets, or will we finally get a little bit more predictability? Personally, I like the upsets. It makes it a more interesting contest to watch. But yeah, you guys let us know your thoughts, and talk to you guys again soon. See ya.